Did you know that Saint Teresa of Avila warned about 12 phrases you should never utter at the grave of a loved one? According to the saint, these words can delay the salvation of the departed soul and bring serious spiritual consequences upon whoever speaks them. Have you ever said any of them? Saint Teresa of Avila was not only one of the greatest mystics in the history of the Catholic Church, she was also a woman who received profound revelations about the spiritual world, purgatory, and the communion of saints. Among her lesser-known teachings, there is a solemn warning about the power our words carry when spoken beside the graves of those who have passed. The saint cautioned that there are 12 specific phrases that must never be spoken in a cemetery or in the presence of a deceased person's body. These words, seemingly harmless, can have devastating consequences both for the soul of the departed and for the person who speaks them. Today, you will discover what those 12 forbidden phrases are and why Saint Teresa implored that no one ever utter them. If you feel you need spiritual protection for yourself and your departed loved ones, write in the comments, "Saint Teresa, protect me." Do not leave this video, because at the very end I will reveal the secret prayer that Saint Teresa herself used to release souls from purgatory. But first, you must learn each of these 12 phrases so you can avoid them. Before we begin, show your devotion. Give this video a like if you seek Saint Teresa's intercession for your departed loved ones, and subscribe if you are searching for eternal peace for your soul. Teresa de Cepeda y Ahumada was born in Avila in 1515 in a deeply Catholic Spain, where death was not a taboo subject but an everyday reality. From an early age, Teresa showed a remarkable sensitivity toward the mystery of eternal life. At just 7 years old, she attempted to slip away from home with her brother Rodrigo, driven by the desire to be martyred by the Moors and reach heaven at once. While this childhood episode may seem innocent, it reveals something essential about Teresa's character: her consuming concern for eternal salvation and the destiny of souls after death. When she entered the Carmelite order, Teresa began to experience mystical visions that the Church would take years to validate. Among these supernatural experiences, the most deeply unsettling were her encounters with purgatory and with souls who pleaded with her for prayers. In her writings, the saint described how departed souls appeared to her in a state of great suffering, begging her to intercede for them. But there was something even more disturbing in these visions. Some souls revealed to her that their torment had been prolonged or intensified because of careless words spoken by their living relatives during funerals or visits to the cemetery. In the book of her life, Teresa briefly mentions these revelations, though ecclesiastical censors of the time ordered several passages to be suppressed entirely. What has survived to us are fragments and indirect references. However, in Teresa's personal letters to her Carmelite sisters, discovered in convent archives centuries later, the warning is clear and specific. There are words that must never be spoken at a grave because they offend God, torment the departed, and draw spiritual consequences upon those who speak them. Saint Teresa was neither superstitious nor fearful. She was a woman of deep theological intelligence, formed in church doctrine and guided by learned confessors. When she warns about something with such insistence, it is not out of irrational fear, but out of revealed knowledge. The saint understood that our words carry real power in the spiritual world. They are not mere sounds that vanish into the air. Every word spoken with intention, especially in sacred places such as cemeteries, produces effects in dimensions that lie beyond our ordinary perception. Why 12 specific phrases? Teresa was precise in her teachings. She never spoke in vague or general terms. She identified exactly 12 expressions that, according to revelations received in deep prayer, must be avoided at all costs. Some of these phrases are so common that you have likely heard them at nearly every funeral you have ever attended. Others are more subtle, disguised as words of comfort or affection, but are equally dangerous from a spiritual standpoint. The reason these words are so harmful has to do with the nature of purgatory and the communion of saints. According to the Catholic doctrine that Teresa knew so thoroughly, souls in purgatory are in the process of purification. They suffer, yes, but that suffering is purifying and temporary. Yet they are entirely dependent on our prayers, sacrifices, and masses offered for their eternal rest. When we speak certain phrases at their graves, we may be interfering with that purification process in ways we cannot begin to imagine. Picture a soul in purgatory, burning in the divine fire of love that purifies its last imperfections. That soul hears every word you speak beside its grave. If your words align with God's will and express genuine supernatural charity, they act like cool water on its torments. But if you speak any of the 12 forbidden phrases, it is like pouring oil onto the fire. The soul's suffering intensifies, its purification is delayed, and you draw upon yourself a spiritual burden you may not even realize you are carrying. Teresa insisted that ignorance does not exempt us from consequences. Many people speak these phrases with the best of intentions, believing they are honoring the deceased or consoling the grieving. But good intentions do not change the objective nature of the act. If you speak words that contradict revealed truth about death, judgment, and eternal life, those words produce real effects, whether you know it or intend it or not. The first of these 12 phrases is so commonplace that you have almost certainly said it yourself without a second thought. It is an expression heard at nearly every modern funeral, spoken with tenderness and apparent devotion. But according to Saint Teresa, this particular phrase can delay a soul's entry into heaven because it contradicts a fundamental truth about the eternal destiny of souls. The first forbidden phrase that Saint Teresa identified is one of the most painful to reveal because virtually all of us have said it at some point. It is so deeply embedded in our culture that it seems impossible it could carry any spiritual danger. Yet Teresa was absolutely clear on this point. The phrase is, "He is already resting in peace," or as it is so often said, "She's at peace now." It sounds harmless, even devout. When we say that someone is resting in peace, we believe we are expressing comfort and hope. But Saint Teresa warned that this statement presumes something that only God has the authority to determine. We are declaring with absolute certainty the eternal state of a soul, without possessing the knowledge or the right to make that declaration. What is more, this phrase can reflect a dangerous ignorance about the reality of purgatory. Catholic doctrine teaches clearly that the majority of souls do not pass directly into heaven at the moment of death. They pass through purgatory, a state of purification where they suffer temporarily until they are cleansed of every last stain before they can stand in the presence of God. When we casually say that someone is already resting in peace, we are assuming that person requires no prayers from us, that their purification is complete, that they are already in heaven. This presumption is harmful in two distinct ways. First, it harms the departed soul because it reduces or eliminates the motivation of the living to pray for them. If everyone believes the soul is already at eternal peace, why offer masses? Why pray the rosary? Why make sacrifices for their rest? The soul is left abandoned in purgatory, deprived of the suffrages it desperately needs. Teresa described in her visions how these souls cried out in anguish when they heard their loved ones speak this phrase, because they knew it meant that prayers on their behalf would cease. Second, it harms the one who speaks it because it reveals a failure to grasp the gravity of sin and the absolute holiness of God. To assume that any person, however virtuous, can enter heaven directly without prior purification is to underestimate God's infinite holiness. God is a consuming fire. Nothing impure can stand in His presence. Even the smallest venial faults, the most subtle disordered attachments, must be utterly burned away before a soul can bear the beatific vision. Saint Teresa knew this through direct experience. She herself had been granted visions of both heaven and purgatory. She understood what it meant to be purified by the fire of divine love. In one of her most celebrated mystical experiences, Teresa beheld her own soul and was horrified to discover how many imperfections still clung to it, despite years of religious life and penance. If a saint of her stature recognized her own need for purification, how can we presume that our loved ones are already at perfect peace? The phrase is also dangerous because it can contain a subtle heresy, an implicit denial of purgatory. In Teresa's time, Protestants rejected the existence of purgatory and taught that salvation is achieved through faith alone, with no need for subsequent purification. To say that someone is already resting in peace can sound uncomfortably close to that heretical doctrine. Even if we do not intend it that way, the practical effect is the same. Souls are left without prayers. There is yet another troubling dimension to this phrase. When we say it, we are also presuming that the person died in a state of grace. But how can we know that with any certainty? Only God knows the condition of a soul at the moment of death. Only He knows whether there was one final second of sincere repentance or one final moment of stubborn rejection. We do not have access to that knowledge. In declaring that someone is at peace, we may be terribly wrong. Saint Teresa taught that the only correct response to any person's death, even the most evidently saintly, is always humility and prayer. We must never presume. We must always plead for God's mercy upon the soul of the departed. We must multiply our masses, our rosaries, our acts of charity in their name. We must act as though that soul depends entirely on our suffrages, because in all likelihood it does. The alternative Teresa proposed was simple but profound. Instead of saying he is already resting in peace, we should say, "May God have mercy on his soul and receive him into his glory." This phrase expresses hope without presumption. It acknowledges that the soul's final destiny rests in God's hands. It implies that we need to pray for that soul. And it places us in the correct disposition: humility, trust in divine mercy, and a commitment to intercession. Teresa also observed that this first forbidden phrase had become so widespread precisely because it is convenient. It frees us from the responsibility of praying for the dead. It spares us the effort of offering masses. It allows us to get on with our lives without the ongoing obligation of remembering our departed in daily prayer. But that convenience carries an enormous spiritual cost for them and for us. If you have ever said this phrase, do not despair. Teresa taught that we can repair the damage by multiplying our prayers for those souls right now. We can offer masses specifically asking forgiveness for having presumed their salvation. We can make sacrifices and acts of charity in their name. God's mercy is infinite, and it is never too late to make things right. But this phrase is nothing compared to the second one, which according to Saint Teresa can delay a soul's salvation for years in purgatory and bring a dangerous spiritual blindness upon whoever speaks it. The second forbidden phrase that Saint Teresa identified is even more insidious than the first, because it disguises itself as a theological virtue. It sounds deeply Christian, full of faith and hope. But according to the saint's revelations, this expression can delay the release of a soul from purgatory for years, even decades. The phrase is, "He is now an angel watching over us from heaven," or in its many variations, "She became our guardian angel." This statement is theologically incorrect on multiple levels and spiritually devastating for the departed soul. Let us examine why Saint Teresa considered it so dangerous. First, it confuses the nature of angels with that of human souls. Angels are pure spirits created by God from the very beginning of time. They were never human and never will be. Human souls, on the other hand, were created to be united with a body. Even in heaven, after the final resurrection, we will have glorified bodies. To say that a person has become an angel is to deny the human nature that God gave them, a nature they will carry for all eternity. Second, and far more seriously, this phrase presumes that the soul is already in heaven, exercising the functions of intercession and protection. It assumes no purification is needed, that the soul is not in purgatory, that it is already beholding the face of God. As we discussed with the first phrase, this presumption eliminates the urgency of praying for the departed. If we believe our loved one is already a guardian angel protecting us from glory, why pray for him? Why offer masses for his rest? Saint Teresa had a particularly painful vision connected with this phrase. She describes in her personal writings how the soul of a mother appeared to her, a woman who had died leaving young children behind. The soul was in terrible agony in purgatory, yet her children, now grown adults, were offering no prayers whatsoever for her. When Teresa asked why, the soul replied, "Because at my funeral they said I was an angel watching over them from heaven, and they believed it. They stopped praying for me that very day." That vision struck Teresa so deeply that she began to warn against this phrase with great urgency. She understood it to be one of the devil's most cunning traps, convincing the living to abandon their dead under the appearance of faith and hope. Satan cannot prevent us from praying for the souls in purgatory, but he can deceive us into stopping voluntarily. There is another theological problem with this expression. It implies that the dead possess an inherent power to intercede and protect. But Catholic doctrine teaches that only canonized saints, whose presence in heaven has been confirmed by the Church after a rigorous process, are guaranteed the capacity to intercede for us. For all other souls, we must assume they need our prayers. We cannot assume they are praying for us. Saint Teresa explained that when we speak this phrase, we are inverting the correct order of charity. We, who are still in a state of merit, are called to help those who can no longer merit for themselves. Souls in purgatory are in a state of pure receptivity. They cannot do anything for themselves or for us. They depend entirely on our suffrages. To pretend they are watching over us is to abandon them in their most desperate need. The saint also warned about the psychological effect of this phrase on the grieving. When we convince a family that their loved one is now a guardian angel, we are blocking the natural and necessary process of Christian mourning. True Christian grief includes constant intercession for the departed, the sacrifice of masses, rosaries, and acts of charity. It means keeping the memory of the deceased alive precisely so we do not forget to pray for them. But if we believe they are already an angel in glory, grief becomes something shallow and self-focused. We simply miss their presence, but do nothing for their soul. Teresa knew of documented cases where souls remained in purgatory until someone, moved by divine inspiration, began to pray for them again after years or even decades of neglect. These souls had been victims of precisely this phrase. Their families, convinced they were guardian angels in heaven, had stopped offering any suffrages. A purification that could have been completed in months stretched on across entire generations. Later saints confirmed this teaching. Saint Pio of Pietrelcina frequently described how souls from purgatory appeared to him asking for prayers. One of the most common complaints from these souls was exactly this. Their families believed they were already in heaven as angels and had therefore stopped praying for them. The correct alternative that Saint Teresa proposed was clear and beautiful. I entrust his soul to the mercy of God and offer my prayers for his swift release from purgatory. This expression acknowledges the likely reality of the soul's situation, maintains the urgency of intercession, and commits us actively to that soul's final salvation. It is also vital to teach this truth to children. How many little ones grow up believing that their grandfather or their mother who passed away is now an angel watching over them. Though it seems comforting, this belief deprives the departed of the most powerful prayers of all, those of innocent children. Teresa insisted that we must teach children the truth, that they should pray every day for their departed loved ones until God clearly reveals their holiness to the Church. If you have spoken this second phrase, if you have told someone that a loved one is now their guardian angel, make amends immediately. Begin a novena of masses for that soul today. Pray the rosary daily for a month for their release. Offer concrete sacrifices. And resolve never again to presume the salvation of any departed soul. There are still 10 phrases yet to be revealed, and the third is the one most commonly spoken at modern funerals, even by well-meaning priests who are unaware of Saint Teresa's warning. Phrases 3 and 4 are so deeply embedded in modern funeral culture that even well-intentioned priests speak them without realizing their spiritual danger. Saint Teresa identified them as expressions that, though they sound devout and comforting, contradict fundamental truths of the faith and deprive the deceased of graces needed for their purification. The third forbidden phrase is, "Today we celebrate his life." This expression has become dominant at contemporary funerals, particularly since the middle of the 20th century. It sounds positive, hopeful, and focused on the good the person brought to the world. But Saint Teresa warned that this phrase contains a subtle and dangerous heresy. It transforms the funeral from an act of divine supplication into a merely human celebration. The traditional Catholic funeral is not a celebration of the life of the deceased. It is a solemn petition for God's mercy upon their soul. It is a humble acknowledgement that we are all sinners in need of purification. It is an act of supreme charity in which the Church militant intercedes for the Church suffering. When we transform the funeral into a celebration of earthly achievements, we divert attention from the only thing that truly matters, the eternal destiny of the soul. Teresa explained that this phrase reveals a secularized mindset that has infiltrated even sacred spaces. To celebrate someone's life is to focus on their professional successes, their human qualities, their social contributions. All of this is secondary and passing. What matters is whether they died in a state of grace, whether they need purification, whether we are willing to help them through our suffrages. By turning the funeral into a celebration, we minimize the gravity of sin and the necessity of redemption. What is more, this phrase can lead to the omission of essential elements of the Catholic funeral. If we are celebrating, why the penitential prayers? Why the dark vestments? Why the emphasis on mercy and forgiveness? Modern funerals that celebrate life tend to strip away any reference to sin, judgment, purgatory, or hell. They become sentimental events that comfort the living but abandon the dead. Saint Teresa had a specific revelation concerning this phrase. She witnessed how souls in purgatory suffered a particular anguish when their funerals became celebrations. These souls could perceive everything that took place at their burial rites. When they heard that their life was being celebrated rather than their soul being prayed for, they experienced the horror of being forgotten at the very moment of their greatest need, as though their loved ones were throwing a party while they burned in purifying fire. The alternative Teresa proposed was a return to the sobriety and solemnity of the traditional funeral. Today, we implore God for the eternal rest of his soul. This reorients everything toward what truly matters. It does not deny the person had good qualities, but it acknowledges that their eternal salvation is now the only priority. The fourth forbidden phrase is closely related and yet even more problematic. We know he is in a better place. This expression, spoken constantly at funerals and gravesites, combines several serious theological errors into a single sentence. First, it once again presumes knowledge that belongs only to God. How do we know someone is in a better place? Did God personally reveal it to us? Has the Church canonized that person? No. We are presuming based on our feelings, our wishes, or our own human assessment of the deceased. But God judges by standards infinitely higher than ours. Second, it implies that heaven is simply a better place in a quantitative sense, as though someone moved from a modest home to a mansion. But heaven is not merely a better place. It is an entirely different order of reality. It is the beatific vision, perfect union with God, participation in the divine life. It is incomparable with anything on earth. To trivialize heaven by calling it simply a better place is to reveal a failure to understand its supernatural nature. Third, and most importantly, this phrase eliminates all urgency to pray for the departed. If we know they are in a better place, they have already reached their final destination. They do not need our prayers. They are not suffering. They require no masses or sacrifices. We can simply move on. But what if they are in purgatory? What if they are enduring the torments of purification, desperately awaiting our suffrages? Saint Teresa related that this particular phrase provoked cries of anguish from the souls in purgatory. They could see their own reality clearly. They were in a place of intense suffering, temporary and purifying, yes, but real. To hear their loved ones believed they were already in a better place was like receiving a sentence of abandonment. It meant no one would pray for them, no masses would be offered, and they would remain in purifying fire for the maximum possible time. Teresa also warned about the spiritual pride concealed in this phrase. When we say we know where someone is after death, we are acting as though we possess divine knowledge. We are judging the state of a soul, something that belongs to God alone. This pride not only offends God, but blinds us spiritually, making us believe we can discern supernatural realities by our own power. There is historical documentation of cases where this presumption had visible consequences. Saints such as John Mary Vianney received revelations of souls who had remained in purgatory for decades, precisely because their families, using phrases like this one, had stopped praying for them immediately after their death. Only when someone, moved by divine inspiration, began offering suffrages again, were these souls finally released. The correct alternative that Saint Teresa taught was humble and prudent. We trust in God's mercy and pray for his soul. This expression acknowledges that we do not know, cannot know, but that we trust in God and fulfill our duty of charity by praying constantly for the departed. Both phrases, the third and the fourth, share a common root: the human desire for instant comfort without the effort of ongoing intercession. We want to feel at ease quickly. We want to believe our loved one is fine, so we do not have to carry the responsibility of praying for them for months or years. But this false comfort comes at a terrible price: the spiritual abandonment of those we love most at the precise moment they need us the most. If you have used these phrases at funerals or cemeteries, begin making amends today. Offer a mass immediately for each person you spoke about in this way. Commit to praying the rosary for them every day for 30 days, and gently warn others about the danger of these all too common expressions. But wait, because the fifth phrase I am about to reveal is the one Saint Teresa witnessed tormenting more souls in purgatory than almost any other. It is so grave that the saint prayed daily that no Catholic would ever speak it. The fifth forbidden phrase is one so serious that Saint Teresa devoted entire pages of her personal writings to warning against it. According to the saint's mystical revelations, this expression does not merely delay the departed soul's salvation, it actively intensifies their suffering in purgatory. Each time someone speaks it at a grave, the soul of the deceased experiences an additional torment that compounds their ordinary purification. The phrase is, "At least he is no longer suffering." It seems compassionate and consoling. When someone dies after a long illness or prolonged suffering, it is natural for the grieving to find comfort in the thought that the pain has finally ended. But Saint Teresa revealed that this phrase reflects a terrible ignorance about the redemptive nature of suffering and the reality of purgatory. First, the phrase presumes that earthly suffering is the worst kind of suffering imaginable. But according to Catholic doctrine and the testimony of the saints, the suffering of purgatory is incomparably more intense than any physical pain experienced on earth. Saint John Mary Vianney taught that the least torment of purgatory surpasses the greatest sufferings of this life. Saint Catherine of Genoa described the fire of purgatory as more intense than any material fire. When we say that someone is at least no longer suffering, we are making a dramatic error. If that person is in purgatory, they are suffering far more intensely than anything they endured in life. Our words reveal that we do not understand the gravity of sin or the infinite holiness of God, that we value physical comfort more than the spiritual purification necessary for eternal salvation. Second, and far more gravely, this phrase dismisses the redemptive value of Christian suffering. Catholic doctrine teaches that suffering united to the cross of Christ carries infinite worth. It can atone for sins, both one's own and those of others. It can shorten or even eliminate the time spent in purgatory. Many saints suffered terribly during their earthly lives precisely to avoid purgatory after death. When we say at least he is no longer suffering, we are implying that all that suffering was pointless, something purely negative from which we should be glad the person has been spared. We are implicitly denying that the pain may have carried a redemptive purpose. We are dismissing one of the deepest mysteries of the Christian faith, that God can transform suffering into an instrument of salvation. Saint Teresa knew this truth from personal experience. She suffered terrible illnesses for much of her life. She was paralyzed for years. She endured pains that the physicians of her time could not relieve. Yet Teresa never viewed her suffering as something negative to escape. She embraced it as a participation in the cross of Christ. She offered it for the conversion of sinners and the liberation of souls from purgatory. And it was for precisely this reason, according to later revelations, that Teresa spent very little time in purgatory before entering into glory. When someone utters this fifth phrase about a person who suffered in life, they are retroactively squandering all the redemptive value of that suffering. They are declaring it was meaningless, that it served no purpose. And the souls in purgatory, who can perceive these words, experience additional anguish when they hear their sacrifice treated with such disregard. Teresa had a specific vision connected to this phrase. She saw the soul of a man who had died after a prolonged agony from cancer. During his final months of life, this man had ceaselessly offered his pain for the conversion of his estranged son. His suffering carried a clear and powerful redemptive purpose. Yet at his funeral, his family repeated over and over, "At least he is no longer suffering. Thank God his agony is finally over." The soul of this man cried out to Teresa from purgatory, revealing that each time his loved one spoke those words, he felt as though his sacrifice had been trampled and despised. His suffering had carried infinite worth when united to Christ, but now it was remembered only as something unfortunate, something to be relieved to see finished. This attitude of his family not only caused him spiritual pain, but also, according to the revelation, delayed his purification, because it showed that even his own loved ones had never understood the meaning of his cross. There is yet another troubling dimension to this phrase. When we say someone is no longer suffering, we are also implying they no longer need our suffrages. If they are no longer suffering, they must be in heaven. No masses are needed. No prayers are required. We can move on. But if they are in purgatory, they are suffering. And their suffering can be relieved or shortened by our prayers, our masses, and our sacrifices. Saint Teresa taught that the correct response to the suffering of someone nearing death is not relief that it will soon be over, but an intensification of prayer so that the suffering may be fully redemptive. And after death, rather than consoling ourselves with the thought that they are no longer in pain, we must multiply our suffrages, precisely because we know they are likely undergoing the purification of purgatory. The alternative Teresa proposed was radically different. I offer his past suffering and my present prayers for his swift entry into heaven. This transforms selfish comfort into effective supernatural charity. It acknowledges the redemptive worth of the suffering endured in life and unites it with our ongoing intercession. If you have spoken this fifth phrase about someone who died after suffering, make amends immediately. Offer masses specifically asking God to apply the full redemptive value of that suffering to the departed soul. Ask forgiveness for having implicitly dismissed their cross, and begin a novena of rosaries for their release from purgatory. We have now covered 5 of the 12 phrases, but the next 3, phrases 6, 7, and 8, are the ones the Church considered heresy in Saint Teresa's time. Speaking them does not only harm the departed, it places the speaker's own salvation in danger. The 3 phrases we are about to reveal are particularly grave because they do not merely harm the departed soul and those who speak them. They represent doctrinal deviations that in Saint Teresa's time were considered formal heresies. The Spanish Inquisition, active during Teresa's lifetime, investigated and penalized those who promoted such ideas. Although these expressions are spoken today with apparent innocence, their content remains contrary to Catholic faith and spiritually destructive. The 6th forbidden phrase is, God needed another angel in heaven. This has become extremely common, especially when a child or young person dies. It appears devout because it mentions God and heaven, but it contains multiple serious heresies that Saint Teresa identified with great precision. First, it attributes need to God. But God is perfect, complete in himself, absolutely self-sufficient. He needs nothing and no one. He does not require more angels, more saints, or more souls in heaven. The entire creation exists out of pure divine generosity, not because God has any lack to fill. To say God needed another angel is to limit his infinite perfection. Second, it once again confuses angels with human souls, an error we have already addressed. But there is something even more serious here. It implies that God causes the death of people in order to meet his own needs. This portrays God as selfish and capricious, a being who takes human lives for his own benefit. It is a terrible blasphemy against divine goodness. The Catholic truce is very different. God permits death. He does not need it. He permits it because he respects the natural laws he established, because suffering and death entered the world through original sin, and because he is capable of drawing good even from evil. But we must never think that God takes someone because he needs them for some celestial purpose. Saint Teresa warned specifically against this phrase because in her era it was associated with heretical movements that denied free will and rightly understood divine providence. To say God needed someone in heaven is also to deny the importance of earthly life as a time of merit and testing. If God simply takes whoever he wishes, whenever he pleases because he needs them, then our freedom and our moral choices carry no meaning. What is more, this phrase offers a false consolation to the grieving at the cost of conveying a distorted image of God. It leads people to think that God is arbitrary, that he takes lives according to his whims or needs. This poisoned consolation can generate a hidden resentment toward God, even while it superficially resembles devout acceptance. The 7th forbidden phrase introduces yet another heresy. He lived like a saint. Surely he is with God now. This statement presumes to judge the holiness of a person and their eternal destiny based on outward human observation. It is a form of presumption that Saint Teresa considered extremely dangerous. The Catholic Church has a lengthy and rigorous process for declaring someone a saint. It requires exhaustive investigation of the person's life, virtues, writings, and miracles attributed to their intercession. It requires the judgment of theologians, cardinals, and ultimately the Pope. It can take decades, sometimes centuries, of careful scrutiny. Why? Because only God truly knows the human heart. Only He knows whether someone died in a state of grace, whether they achieved heroic virtue, whether they can be proposed as a model of Christian life. When we ordinary mortals declare that someone lived like a saint and is therefore surely with God, we are usurping a prerogative that belongs only to the Church, guided by the Holy Spirit. We are presuming to know the interior state of a soul, something even confessors cannot know with absolute certainty. Saint Teresa was especially sensitive to this error because she herself had been misjudged for years. Many thought her deluded, even possessed by the devil. Others regarded her as a living saint. She knew how terribly deceptive outward appearances can be. She was deeply aware of her own inner misery, her imperfections, her struggles. And she knew that only God, not human observers, could truly judge her spiritual state. This phrase, like all the others, eliminates the urgency of praying for the departed. If we are confident someone is with God, why pray? Yet the truth is that even the most apparently saintly people may have died with imperfections requiring purification. Canonized saints themselves, according to their own revelations, spent time in purgatory despite their heroically virtuous lives. There is documentation of cases where those considered holy in life turned out to need many prayers after death. Saint Pio of Pietrelcina described how the soul of a priest appeared to him, a man everyone had considered a saint. The priest had died, and all presumed he went straight to heaven. But he appeared to Padre Pio asking for prayers because he was in purgatory expiating hidden faults that no one had ever known about in his lifetime. The eighth forbidden phrase completes this trio of heresies. He was too good for this world. This expression, common especially when a young or virtuous person dies, contains a Gnostic heresy that the Church has condemned since the earliest centuries. Ancient Gnosticism taught that the material world is evil and that pure souls must escape from it as quickly as possible. This heresy contradicts the Catholic teaching that creation is good because God made it, and that we are called to grow in holiness precisely in this world, not by escaping from it. When we say someone was too good for this world, we are implying that goodness and sanctity are incompatible with earthly life. We are suggesting that God must rescue good people by removing them from this evil world. But Christ Himself, being perfectly good, lived 33 years in this world. The greatest saints remained on earth for decades, practicing and teaching virtue. This phrase also reflects a mistaken understanding of the purpose of earthly life. We are not here simply waiting to escape to heaven. We are here to grow in holiness, to serve others, to give glory to God, and to cooperate with His plan of salvation. To say someone was too good for this world is to imply they had no divine purpose to fulfill here, or that they left before fulfilling it. Saint Teresa fought this Gnostic mindset throughout her life. She loved earthly life precisely because it was the battlefield where eternal salvation was won or lost. She valued every day on earth as an opportunity to grow in love for God and service to others. To despise the world as something from which good people must be rescued was, for Teresa, a subtle form of ingratitude toward the Creator. This phrase can also generate a dangerous resentment. If a good person was taken because they were too good for this world, what does that say about those of us who remain? Are we too sinful to be taken to heaven? Is God leaving us here as a punishment? This poisoned logic can quietly undermine faith and breed bitterness toward divine providence. All three phrases, the sixth, seventh, and eighth, share the common error of presumptuously judging realities that only God knows and that only the Church can declare with authority. Saint Teresa implored Catholics to return to the traditional humility of the faith, to assume that everyone needs mercy, that everyone requires purification, and that no one, except the canonized, is guaranteed heaven without purgatory. If you have spoken any of these 3 heretical phrases, even with the best intentions, you need to make serious reparation. Confess this error if you can. Offer an expiatory mass. Pray a rosary of reparation. And above all, multiply your prayers for the souls of those you spoke about, because you have likely deprived them of suffrages they needed. 4 more phrases remain to be revealed. The 9th is so grave that Saint Teresa begged every day that no Catholic would ever speak it. It is the phrase over which she received her most terrifying visions of purgatory. The 9th forbidden phrase is the one over which Saint Teresa received her most devastating revelations. The expression that moved her to implore God daily in her final years that no Catholic would ever speak it. In her personal writings, Teresa devotes entire pages to warning against it, describing with harrowing detail what she witnessed in her mystical visions. The phrase is, "Now he is reunited with his loved ones who went before him." This seems tender and consoling. When someone dies after having previously lost a spouse, parents, or children, it is natural to picture a joyful reunion in the hereafter. Popular culture has romanticized this image until it has become one of the standard consolations spoken at funerals. But Saint Teresa saw the spiritual reality behind this phrase and was horrified by what she found. In one of her most profound mystical experiences, Teresa was led spiritually to contemplate different regions of purgatory. There she saw something that marked her forever. Souls separated from one another by walls of fire, unable to communicate or console each other, each one suffering their purification in complete solitude. Some of these souls had been family members in life, yet now they were utterly isolated, each enduring their own process of expiation. Teresa understood then that purgatory is not a place of happy reunions. It is not a social environment where souls converse and keep each other company. It is a state of intensely individual purification, where each soul faces alone the consequences of its sins and lukewarmness. The idea that the departed are immediately reunited with their loved ones is a human fantasy that bears no resemblance to supernatural reality. The saint also witnessed something even more disturbing. She observed that when the living spoke this phrase over their departed, the souls in purgatory experienced additional torment. Why? Because these words revealed that their living loved ones believed them to be in a happy state of reunion, which eliminates all urgency to pray for them. The souls could see how their relatives, comforted by the idea of a heavenly reunion, had stopped offering masses and suffrages. Saint Teresa describes in her letters to the Carmelites how these souls pleaded with her to warn Catholics about this error. One of them said to her directly, "My children believe I am joyfully reunited with my husband in heaven, and so they do not pray for me. But I suffer alone in burning solitude, separated from him who is also expiating his own faults, and no one is helping either of us with their prayers." There is another serious theological problem with this phrase. It presumes that the persons who died before are automatically in heaven waiting for the recently deceased. But how can we know that? If a father died 20 years ago without sufficient prayers being offered for him, he may still be in purgatory. If a wife died a decade ago and her children assumed she was in heaven without offering suffrages, she may still be in the purification process. To say that they are now reunited is to presume the state of multiple souls simultaneously. The phrase also reflects a sentimental and superficial understanding of heaven. Heaven is not primarily a place of family reunions. It is the beatific vision, the direct contemplation of God, participation in the Trinitarian life. The saints in heaven are in a state of permanent ecstasy as they behold God. Human relationships continue, yes, but in a completely transformed way, and they are entirely secondary to this central reality. To romanticize heaven as a grand family gathering is to trivialize its true and supernatural nature. Saint Teresa knew through mystical experience what it meant to contemplate God. She had been granted raptures in which she glimpsed divine glory. She knew that no human reunion, however joyful, could compare with the bliss of seeing God face to face. When we reduce heaven to a gathering of family members, we reveal that we have not truly understood what eternal glory means. The saint also warned about the danger of this phrase for the bereaved themselves. When someone finds comfort in the thought that their loved one is reunited with others in heaven, they are seeking an immediate emotional consolation that prevents them from grieving in an authentically Christian way. True Christian grief includes accepting the mystery, trusting in divine mercy without presumption, and above all, committing actively to intercession for the departed. Teresa knew of specific cases where this phrase had caused grave spiritual damage. She was personally acquainted with a family where 3 generations had used this expression at every funeral. The grandmother died, and they said she was reunited with her husband. The mother died, and they said she was reunited with the grandmother. The son died, and they said he was reunited with his mother and grandmother. But none of them had received adequate suffrages, because everyone presumed they were already happily together in heaven. When Teresa prayed for this family, she received the revelation that all 3 souls were still in purgatory, suffering in solitude, deprived of the prayers they desperately needed. The alternative that Saint Teresa proposed was radically different and far more genuinely charitable. I pray that God will have mercy on his soul and on all the souls of his loved ones who have gone before him. This expression presumes nothing, acknowledges the need for mercy for everyone, and commits us to praying not only for the recently departed, but for all who preceded them in death. Teresa pleaded especially with mothers and fathers to avoid this phrase when a child died. It is heartbreakingly common to hear at children's funerals that the little one is now with the grandparents in heaven. But even a baptized child may need purification from the consequences of original sin. And the grandparents are in all likelihood still in purgatory, in need of prayers themselves. If you have spoken this 9th phrase, grasp the gravity of what you have done. You have presumed the state of multiple souls at once. You have eliminated the motivation to pray for them. You have trivialized the nature of both heaven and purgatory. You must begin immediately an intensive campaign of suffrages for each person you mention. Offer masses for each of them. Pray the rosary daily for months. Make concrete sacrifices and resolve never to make this error again. Only 3 phrases remain to be revealed. The next 2, numbers 10 and 11, are the ones spoken out of misguided compassion, in the belief that we are consoling the bereaved, when in reality we are condemning the departed to spiritual abandonment. Phrases 10 and 11 are particularly insidious because they are spoken with a genuinely kind intention, to console those who are grieving. They seem like expressions of love and compassion. They are meant to ease the pain of those who have just lost someone dear to them. But Saint Teresa warned that these words, however well-meaning, constitute one of the cruelest forms of spiritual abandonment of the departed. They are the equivalent of offering a poisoned sweet, pleasant to receive, but deadly in its effects. The 10th forbidden phrase is, "Don't cry. He wouldn't want to see you upset." This has become the standard consolation at modern funerals. When someone weeps for a loved one who has died, others around them inevitably say that they should not cry because the deceased would not want to see them in pain. It sounds loving and considerate, but Saint Teresa saw the terrible spiritual reality concealed within these words. First, this phrase completely inverts the correct order of charity. True charity after death does not consist of the departed person worrying about the emotional well-being of the living. True charity consists of the living caring about the eternal state of the departed. To say he wouldn't want to see you upset is to project earthly concerns onto the soul of the deceased, when their only real need now is our prayers and suffrages. Second, and more gravely, this phrase discourages authentic Christian mourning. Weeping for the dead is a work of spiritual mercy when it is rightly directed. We do not weep primarily for our own loss. We weep for the condition of the departed soul. We weep because they may be in purgatory, suffering. We weep because they committed sins that must now be expiated. We weep because they desperately need our prayers. This kind of grief is holy and productive. It keeps us conscious of our obligation to intercede. Saint Teresa experienced this truth firsthand. When her father died, she wept abundantly. But her tears were not self-pity. They were an expression of burning desire to help his soul. Every tear drove her to pray more, to offer more sacrifices, to arrange more masses. Her weeping was fuel for her intercession. Had anyone told her not to cry because her father would not want to see her suffer, Teresa would have rejected that false consolation as a snare of the devil, a device to weaken her charity. In her visions, the saint also witnessed how souls in purgatory reacted when they heard this phrase spoken. Far from rejoicing that their loved ones were spared pain, these souls cried out in desperation, "No! Do not stop weeping for me! Weep for my soul! Your tears bring me relief when you turn them into prayer. Suffer for me as I suffer in these purifying flames. Do not abandon me under the pretense that I would not want to see you in pain." This phrase also reveals a profoundly worldly mindset. It presumes that the worst thing that can happen to us is emotional suffering in this life, when in truth, the worst thing is eternal condemnation, or a prolonged and painful purification in purgatory. It presumes that the psychological comfort of the living is more important than the eternal salvation of the departed. It is a diabolical inversion of priorities. Saint Teresa taught that the correct response when someone is weeping for a loved one is not to tell them to stop crying, but to help them transform those tears into effective intercession. We should say, "Weep for his soul and let each tear become a prayer. Let us offer masses together for his rest. Let us transform this grief into supernatural charity." The 11th forbidden phrase is closely related and completes this pair of misguided consolations. You need to move on with your life. This expression, constantly offered to widows, orphans, and parents who have lost children, sounds like practical and healthy advice. But Saint Teresa identified it as one of the subtlest and most effective tools the devil uses to make the living abandon their dead. Moving on with life is not bad in itself. The living have duties and responsibilities they must fulfill. But when this phrase is used to discourage the constant remembrance of the departed, to minimize the importance of praying for their soul, to push the grieving person to focus exclusively on earthly affairs and forget their duty of intercession, it becomes a deadly trap. Teresa knew holy widows who spent decades offering daily masses and prayers for their deceased husbands. These women were not paralyzed by grief. They had transformed their conjugal love into a permanent supernatural charity. They fulfilled their earthly responsibilities, but they kept the memory of their husbands alive, precisely so they would not forget to pray for them. If someone had told them to move on with their lives, meaning to forget the departed and stop praying for them, Teresa would have considered that diabolical counsel. The phrase is especially dangerous because it appeals to our natural instinct to avoid pain. It is easier to move on by forgetting than to move on while keeping the intercession alive. It is more comfortable to bury the memories along with the body than to hold them present in our daily prayers. But this comfort carries a terrible price: the spiritual abandonment of those we love most at the very moment they need us the most. Saint Teresa had a particularly painful revelation connected to this phrase. she saw the soul of a wife in purgatory, whose widowed husband had been advised by well-meaning friends to move on with his life. The man, interpreting this as permission to stop thinking about his deceased wife, ceased praying for her, stopped offering masses, eventually remarried, and practically forgot her existence altogether. This woman's soul had been in purgatory for decades, abandoned by the one human being who had a special obligation to intercede for her. The truth Teresa taught was this: moving on with life must include the permanent practice of intercession for our departed loved ones. It does not mean forgetting them. It means loving them more perfectly, with supernatural charity rather than mere natural affection. It means turning every day of our lives into an opportunity to help them through our prayers and sacrifices. Both phrases, the 10th and the 11th, share the same poisoned root. They prioritize the temporary emotional well-being of the living over the eternal need of the dead. They offer cheap comfort at the cost of spiritual abandonment. They are expressions of a purely human compassion that lacks any supernatural perspective. If you have spoken either of these two phrases, reflect seriously on the harm it may have caused. You have discouraged someone from weeping productively for a departed soul. You have encouraged someone to forget their obligation of intercession. You have placed psychological comfort above eternal charity. You need to ask God's forgiveness and make it right by reaching out to those people, encouraging them now to take up again with renewed intensity the practice of praying for their departed loved ones. And now we come to the 12th phrase, the most dangerous of all, the one Saint Teresa called the silent blasphemy, the one that can cause not only the temporary abandonment of the departed, but eternal consequences for the soul in purgatory and for whoever speaks it. We have arrived at last at the 12th and final forbidden phrase, the one Saint Teresa of Avila considered the most dangerous of all. In her personal writings, the saint called it the silent blasphemy because while it does not explicitly invoke the name of God, it attacks directly His justice, His mercy, and His providence. This phrase does not only condemn the departed to spiritual abandonment, it can endanger the eternal salvation of whoever speaks it, if they persist in the attitude it reflects. The phrase is, "It is not fair that he died like this." This expression is heard constantly at funerals, especially when someone dies young in an accident from sudden illness or under tragic circumstances. It seems like a natural human reaction in the face of pain. But Saint Teresa saw that behind these words lies a rebellion against God so grave that it can constitute mortal sin if persisted in with full awareness and deliberate consent. When we say that it is not fair that someone died this way, we are making several deeply serious accusations against God. First, we are asserting that we know better than He does what is just. We are placing our limited human judgment above the infinite divine wisdom. We are putting God Himself on trial, declaring Him guilty of injustice. This is the very essence of blasphemy, attributing to God characteristics contrary to His perfect nature. Second, we are implicitly denying the doctrine of original sin and its consequences. Death entered the world through sin. We all die because we all bear the mark of Adam's fall. The manner and timing of our death are part of the consequences of original sin, combined with the natural causes that God permits in His providence. To call a death unjust is to forget that none of us deserves even one more moment of life. Life itself is an unearned gift of divine mercy. Third, this phrase reveals that we place temporal well-being above eternal salvation. We consider it unfair for someone to die young or under difficult circumstances because we value earthly years of life more than the destiny of the soul. But from the perspective of eternity, the only thing that matters is dying in a state of grace. Some saints died very young precisely because God, in His mercy, called them before they could commit serious sins that would endanger their salvation. Saint Teresa had a devastating vision connected with this phrase. She saw a man who had died in an accident at the age of 30. His family, consumed by bitterness, repeated endlessly, "It is not fair that he died this way. He was so young. He had so much to live for." This attitude of rebellion against divine providence not only prevented them from praying effectively for the departed, but was also generating a resentment toward God that put their own souls at risk. Teresa saw that the soul of this man was in purgatory, not in heaven, as his family seemed to assume by protesting the injustice of his death. But what was most terrible was that their resentful prayers, contaminated by the implicit accusation against God, not only failed to help him, but actually prolonged his purification. Souls in purgatory are aided by prayers offered in humble submission to the divine will. They suffer when prayers come mixed with rebellion and accusations against God. The phrase is also dangerous because it can destroy the faith of those who hear it. When a priest or a person of influence says at a funeral that it is not fair that someone died this way, they are planting seeds of doubt about God's goodness in the hearts of all present. They are suggesting that God is arbitrary, cruel, or indifferent, slowly eroding the trust in divine providence that is the very foundation of Christian life. Saint Teresa taught that the correct response to any death, however humanly tragic it may appear, is the same words Christ himself taught us: "Thy will be done." We do not understand God's ways. We do not see the full picture. We do not know what would have happened had the person lived longer. Only God knows. And He, who is infinitely good, wise, and merciful, permits each death at the precise moment His providence determines. This does not mean we cannot feel pain, grief, or even bewilderment at a death. Jesus himself wept at the tomb of Lazarus. But there is an immense difference between legitimate human sorrow and a blasphemous accusation against God's justice. We can say, "I do not understand why you permitted this, but I trust in you." We cannot say, "This is unjust." Teresa also warned that this phrase is often the beginning of a chain of apostasy. People who begin by accusing God of injustice in one death can end by abandoning the faith entirely. Resentment against God over something we consider unfair can poison the whole of our spiritual life, destroy our prayer, and ultimately lead us toward eternal ruin. The alternative Saint Teresa proposed requires profound humility and heroic faith. I accept this painful mystery, trusting that God, who is infinitely just and merciful, knows reasons I cannot understand. I offer my grief for the eternal rest of his soul. This response transforms tragedy into sanctification, pain into merit, incomprehension into pure faith. Now that you know the 12 forbidden phrases, what should you say at a grave? Saint Teresa left clear and practical teachings on the correct words to use when honoring the departed with true Christian charity. The right words always include several essential elements. First, an acknowledgement of divine mercy. Merciful God, have pity on this soul. Second, a specific petition for their release. Free them soon from all purification and bring them into your presence. Third, a personal commitment to intercession. I offer my prayers and sacrifices for their eternal rest. Teresa also taught specific prayers. The most powerful is the one she herself composed and prayed daily for the souls in purgatory. Eternal Father, by the wounds of Christ and the sorrows of the Most Holy Virgin Mary, I implore you to free the souls in purgatory, especially the one most in need of your mercy. When you visit a cemetery, pray the traditional Requiem. Requiem aeternam dona eis, Domini, et lux perpetua luceat eis. Requiescant in pace. Grant them eternal rest, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. This centuries-old prayer contains within it all the correct theology of death and the life to come. You may also pray the Rosary for the departed. offering each mystery for the souls in purgatory. You can make the sign of the cross over the grave and say, "By the sign of the Holy Cross, Lord, free this soul from every punishment and bring them to eternal glory." Saint Teresa insisted that words spoken at a grave must always be prayers addressed to God on behalf of the departed, never conversations with the deceased as though they were present and listening. The soul in purgatory is not at the graveside, and it does not need our words directed to it. It needs our prayers directed to God for it. If you have spoken any of the 12 forbidden phrases, begin your reparation today. Confess this error if it involves grave sin. Offer 30 masses for the souls you mentioned in those phrases. Pray a rosary every day, for a month for them. Make a visit to the cemetery where they are buried and pray the correct prayers that Saint Teresa taught. And now that you know the 12 forbidden phrases and the words that truly help, let me give you the final gift that Saint Teresa left for you. The secret prayer she used to release souls from purgatory with extraordinary power. You have come to the end of this journey through the 12 phrases that Saint Teresa of Avila warned must never be spoken at a grave. Let us briefly review what we have discovered, so that it may be firmly fixed in your memory and you may protect both your departed loved ones and your own soul. The first forbidden phrase was, "He is already resting in peace," which presumes the state of the soul and eliminates the urgency of prayer. The second, "He is now an angel watching over us from heaven," confuses the nature of human souls with angels and abandons the departed. The third, "Today we celebrate his life," turns the funeral into a secular event rather than a solemn petition for mercy. The fourth, "We know he is in a better place," presumes divine knowledge and removes all need for suffrages. The fifth phrase was, "At least he is no longer suffering," which dismisses the redemptive value of suffering and leaves the soul abandoned in purgatory. Phrases 6, 7, and 8 constituted formal heresies. God needed another angel in heaven. He lived like a saint, so surely he is with God, and he was too good for this world. All three attack fundamental doctrines of the Catholic faith. The ninth phrase, "Now he is reunited with his loved ones who went before him," was the one over which Saint Teresa received her most terrifying visions as she saw souls suffering in solitude while their families imagined joyful heavenly reunions. Phrases 10 and 11, "Don't cry, he wouldn't want to see you upset and you need to move on with your life," represent the false compassion that discourages productive Christian grief and promotes the spiritual forgetting of the departed. And finally, the 12th phrase, the silent blasphemy. "It is not fair that he died like this." This expression accuses God of injustice, denies divine providence, and can endanger the eternal salvation of the departed soul as well as of whoever speaks it. Now that you know these 12 forbidden phrases, you carry a sacred responsibility. You must avoid them completely in your own life. You must gently warn your family and friends of their danger. And when you hear others speak them, correct with charity but with firmness. Above all, repair any damage already done by multiplying your prayers for every soul you mentioned in those phrases. But there is something more. Something Saint Teresa kept as her most precious treasure and shared only with her closest Carmelite sisters. It is a prayer she composed after years of mystical experience with purgatory, a prayer that, according to the testimony of the Carmelites who knew her, carried extraordinary power to release souls from purgatory. The prayer is this: "Eternal Father, through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the sacred wounds of your Son Jesus Christ, I offer you the souls in purgatory. By your infinite mercy and through the merits of Christ, which infinitely surpass all the sins of the world, grant these souls the grace of perfect purification and bring them without delay to behold your glorious face. May the flames of purgatory be transformed by your love into the light of glory. Release them, especially those most in need of your mercy, the most forgotten, those for whom no one prays. Through Christ our Lord. Amen."
Saint Teresa taught that this prayer should be prayed daily, especially before the Blessed Sacrament or after receiving Holy Communion, when the power of intercession is at its greatest. She promised that whoever prayed this prayer faithfully every day for a full year would see signs that souls had been released from purgatory through their intercession. She also left a complete protocol for visiting cemeteries.
Upon entering the cemetery grounds, make the sign of the cross and say, "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, I come to fulfill my duty of charity toward the souls who rest here." Walk to the grave you wish to visit, praying the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be as you go. Standing before the grave, do not speak to the departed. Speak to God on their behalf. "Lord Jesus Christ, by your holy cross and resurrection, free the soul of your servant, name of the departed, from every punishment, and bring them to eternal glory." Then pray a full rosary, offering it for that soul. If you do not have time for the full rosary, pray at least 1 decade with deep devotion. Before leaving the cemetery, stop somewhere in the center and pray for all the souls buried there, especially for those who have no one to pray for them. Pray the special prayer of Saint Teresa that I have just shared with you. Then make an offering. If you are able, arrange for a Mass to be offered for the souls in purgatory. If that is not possible at the moment, offer a concrete sacrifice that same day, such as fasting from something you enjoy, and offer it for them. Saint Teresa also taught that after visiting a cemetery, we must keep the memory of our departed alive in daily prayer. She suggested maintaining a written list of the names of those who have died for whom we have a special obligation to pray. Parents, spouses, children, godparents, benefactors, and mentioning each name daily in prayer, however briefly. The saint lived this teaching to her very last breath. When she was dying, her final words were prayers for the souls in purgatory. Even in her agony, Teresa was thinking more of helping others than of her own situation. This is the spirit of supernatural charity to which she calls each of us. If you apply faithfully everything you have learned in this message, if you avoid the 12 forbidden phrases, use the correct words, pray the special prayer each day, visit cemeteries with a Teresian protocol, then you can be certain that you are fulfilling your sacred duty toward your departed loved ones. More than that, you will be cooperating with God's work of mercy, helping to release souls from purgatory so that they may finally behold the face of God in eternal glory. And when you yourself die, when your soul faces the particular judgment and perhaps purgatory, the souls you help to release will intercede for you. Saint Teresa taught that there is a mysterious solidarity among those who are devoted to the souls in purgatory. The souls we free with our prayers become our most powerful intercessors when we ourselves stand in need of mercy. Do not let this knowledge remain idle in your mind. Act today. Begin today the daily practice of praying for the departed. Visit the cemetery this week. Arrange masses for your loved ones who have passed. And above all, share this message with others, so that they too may avoid the forbidden phrases and truly help their departed loved ones. Subscribe to this channel to receive more teachings from the saints on the spiritual life and eternal salvation. Share this video with your Catholic family and friends, because everyone needs to hear this urgent warning from Saint Teresa. And watch our other videos, where we reveal more spiritual truths that the saints left for our protection and sanctification. May Saint Teresa of Avila intercede for you, for your living and departed loved ones, and obtain for you the grace to live and die in perfect union with the will of God. Amen.